sit down to talk with Federica Ambrogi. Federica Ambrogi is a certified coactive coach who specializes in working with senior professionals who are looking for major career change. Today, we're going to be talking with Fede about career transitions and how to know when you are ready for a change.
This is the Career Cue, the podcast focused on helping you navigate the signals in your career to keep you growing and moving forward in business and in life. Here's today's host, Dana Redmond.
Fede, welcome to the show. We're glad to have you on the Career Cue.
Oh, hi, Dana. Thank you so much for having me.
This is so exciting. I'm glad we could reconnect after so many years that we haven't been able to. So this is an exciting topic too. And so I'm excited to get started talking with you about this.
Oh, I'm very excited too.
So let's start out and tell us a little bit about your career path and transitions.
All right. Well, I have had few career changes in my life. I'm Italian, as you can hear from the accent, and I've started working in Italy, and I was working in marketing. And I did a few years for this American company. I was working with traffic signs and business to business. And I was loving the marketing, and I was doing online and digital stuff at the very beginning. And then in Milan, I met my husband, my future husband, and he's British. And so we decided to move together to London. And at that point, I resigned and I just moved without nothing and without a job. And a few people, including my parents, thought I was completely crazy. But I took the risk. And then I arrived in London. And I did something similar to my previous job for a little while. But then just out of the blue, I was called for an interview for this very cool, very new, almost a little bit more than startup, but still very cool company that was doing online advertising. And I thought, I know nothing about what they want me to do. I never done it. It is not marketing. Why should I do it? Why should I go? And then I started to think, well, currently my commute is 2 hours outside of London. This one is in Soho, in the center of London. I'll just take it and see where it goes. And so that was the first change completely. I was not prepared and I didn't plan for it. And I did it for the, very weird reason, the commute. But I loved that job, and I was doing account management in a very techie world that I had to learn almost from scratch. And I did do a great career, and I started to learn more things. And I went from account management. I learned more about the technical side. Then sort of moving to a bigger company. We were both at some point. And I started to do more business planning and strategy. And it just grew very organically and naturally and very quickly as well. And so I had fantastic few years where I was just, growing, developing, learning new stuff. And then in the meantime, got married, got children and all of that. And then we had this opportunity. My husband came back home and said, I got an offer in Singapore. Shall we go? And I said, okay, why not? And again, I resigned and I ended up in Singapore. And as soon as I touched the ground, I got pregnant again. So I had sort of a natural break, if you want, from work and from career. But I used it to rethink a little bit, what I was doing and where I wanted to go. And I spent almost 2 years thinking, what do I really like? What are my passions? What did I enjoy so much about my previous job and my previous role? And I knew that the part that it really interested me the most was the whole people management and people development and mentoring and coaching. And so I started to think where I can go from there. So, I tried a few things. I did a little bit of consulting. I tried to understand a little bit more the world of HR. I tested the waters in various areas. And at the end, in the meantime, we moved to Qatar, where I live now. And so I decided to take a course here nearby in Dubai. a coaching course, how to be a coach. And again, I didn't exactly know what it was about. I had a vague idea, but I thought, why not? There's nothing better. I tried a few things and nothing excites me. Let's try the next one. And I loved it. I remember I went the first 3 days to this course and I was completely sold on it. I think this is going to revolutionize my life and I can revolutionize others people's life. And I just love it. And so this is what I'm doing now.
That's incredible. I love that story. I love your ability to, and foresight, right, for you to take some time and figure out what was it about all those other jobs you'd had that you liked so much and sort of be able to, hone in on something that then has led you to a great new career. That's a great story. I love. Thanks for sharing that. Well, so if someone is sitting there now thinking, maybe they want a career change or they want a job change, where should they start?
Well, there is the first starting point is always start with your passions, which is something that you hear a lot, but is actually very difficult sometimes. It does take a while to figure out what is my passion and really identify it, but also once you start to work on what are my passion, how can I use those ones to create a career out of it? And so I think there are two parallel ways to think. One is learn more and really do the suggestion and the work that I do with my clients is really to dig deeper inside themselves and understanding what those passions are, what those values are. For them, but also thinking about what is the reality of the situation. And the clients that I work with generally are, quite senior professionals in the middle, they are sort of 40 years old to 50 years old. So they have families, maybe young children, responsibilities. They need to think about all the stuff. They cannot just take the big risk. And so thinking about creating some sort of safety net, whether it is some money that they can save and put aside if anything goes wrong, or thinking about, I can take maybe a sabbatical, or I can take some time off, or what happens if everything goes wrong. So, I always suggest make sure that there is that worst case scenario. If it happens, you are still safe. And then, go with your passion and really start to think about that. And that's almost more it requires almost more time than anything else to really understand what drives us, what it is that gives us the energy. Right. So a big part of my job is working with that.
Right. And I actually love your point about that it really has to be some level of a balance between there is a reality. Many people already have commitments, have families, have mortgages or rent or something, right? It's like the reality of life. And then at the same time, how do you then balance that with sort of pursuing that passion if there might be a break in job or taking something new that could involve risk. So I love that sort of, balanced approach to it, right? Needing that safety net.
Yes. And often it's, sometimes we're very scared about the long term, changing a new job, a new career. But before we get to actually change and make that major step, there are so many other steps in between. And it is all about starting with the first small step, breaking down this big major, what am I going to do next, into, well, what is really the next step that I can do now? Updating my CV or, just starting to think about the company that I would like to work for and making a list of those. And so sometimes taking a step back and saying, before I make the big thing, there are so many other smaller steps that needs to be done. Let's start to identify those and let's start to walk on those first few stones, if you want, as stepping stones towards the major thing.
I like that. That's great to think about, because there are a lot of little steps you can take in sort of preparation for that before you take some big new leap, right? Before you quit a job or before you actively start getting there. So you mentioned, do you have some more of those? So you mentioned like updating CV, making a list of companies. What are some of those other sort of small steps you can see people doing?
Well, so the main things is updating CV is LinkedIn. So updating the profile on LinkedIn and, defining, there are millions of experts now on LinkedIn, and they tell you what to do and how to do it and how your profile should be calling for the right audience and all of that. So, taking some of those advices, the ones that are more relevant. And I think the other thing is really work on your network. And this is through LinkedIn, of course, but also personal network, and starting to think, once you have more or less an idea either of the company you want to work for, or maybe you have a person in mind that is doing a great job and sort of a role model, or somebody that you think, oh, I really would like to have a life like that guy, seems to have it all, everything figured out and balanced. So start to talk about those people and identify those contacts, whether they are your direct contacts or maybe a friend of a friend. My suggestion is always, send them an email, send them a little note. And if logistically is possible, ask them out for a coffee, offer them a coffee, a lunch, and just have a chat. I think the chat is always the first step. And it helps to understand the other person and whatever it is that we're trying to understand, but also it helps to understand ourselves, because once we start to talk, whatever it is inside our belly, I say, it starts to come out, and that's when we start to make it more real.
That's so interesting to think about, right? That it is, once you start talking with people and you talk more and more about it, you yourself can then understand a little bit more about you. Sort of that first time somebody asks you, oh, what are you looking to do? Or what are you interested in? It might not be really clear for you, right? But at the fifth or sixth time, another person asks you that, you might have worked through that, right? And figured that out as you're going along in your networking process, for sure. So how do you think, how does someone know if they are ready for, a career transition versus it just being sort of a rough patch in their current role that they need to get through or get over?
Well, sometimes it's not that easy to understand, and maybe there isn't a difference between the two situations. But the first question is really to ask ourselves, do I feel fulfilled in this role and in whatever I'm doing? Do I feel I'm contributing, to society? Or, sometimes in coaching we say, what is your life mission? And so it's asking ourselves, am I fulfilling what it is my mission? And what's that, by the way?
Right.
And sometimes it goes to those very big questions and those, if we are able to answer or to realize that this is the question that we need to answer to, this is the moment where maybe we are ready for that life change. That is not just career change, it's a lot more than that. So that is, if we think that the question that we need to answer to is the big one, then definitely we are ready for something major. If it is more of an adjustment or, we need to find different spaces and moving, then maybe it doesn't need to be such a drastic and dramatic things. Maybe something that we can even find in the current job and current role. And what it is more about is it's finding a different perspective. It's looking at what we are doing, our job and our role in a different way. And this is something that I do a lot with my clients, right? Looking at the same reality, but from many different perspectives. And very often they pick up things that, they look at something in a totally different way and it become a different way for them, a different role.
Mm-hmm. That's so interesting, that different perspective piece. So how do you advise people? I mean, if they're sort of sitting there thinking, they're not loving their job, or they're not liking a particular part of their job, how do they go about sort of finding what their passion is, or, answering that? Do I feel fulfilled, right? Like is there pieces more than that big question? You sort of have that big change. Like, are there little steps in there or little questions to ask to help somebody get there, you think?
There are various, exercise, if you want, or various ways and styles even of, I'm talking about coaching, I'm thinking about that. But something that I work a lot on in those cases are values, our own values. What is important for me, what it is that I value, and why that is something that is so important in my life. Why, sometimes it could be I value very much success. But what is success for me? And what does it mean? And I'm working on a deeper definition, if you want, of that word, whatever it is, that value that we say. It really helps us understand what are those driving forces, what are those passions that we have. And then once, when we, as we were saying before, once we start to talk about things, they become more real, and they become more defined, and they become more clear. And so when it's out there and it's in front of us, and we can start to look at it from various angles and from various perspectives, then we can say, okay, I know what it is that either is missing or I'm looking for. And now I can be more intentional into either looking for it or ensuring that it becomes part of my profession or of my role. And, sometimes, again, you do not need to change necessarily your role. You just need to change the way you go about it and being more intentional in including what you want or looking for what you want. And it might be a conversation with your manager to say, hey, I'm looking to do more of this and to develop into that because I'm really interested. Let's find a way, or this sort of conversations.
That's so interesting to think about, right? That it could be your career transition could happen in role while you're still at the same company, possibly in the same role, but just taking on different activities, or even just the way you personally approach it or think about it could be that thing that re-sparks you. I like that.
Yeah. Well, because, there are various situations, but often it has happened with some of my clients that they weren't, the saying of, I don't like my job anymore. It wasn't exactly the thing. It was more of a symptom of something else. Mm-hmm. And that something else, it might reflect, it's something that is internal, and that then it applies to various aspects of anybody's life. And in this case, it's a symptom that comes out in the job and say, no, I don't like my job. But in reality, if we are able to, look at things in a different perspective and understanding what it is really that thing internally that is not working, then, we don't need to change the job
right.
Because we've already changed the attitude and the perspective. So it's going to be fine.
Right. I love that. Yeah, changing the attitude and perspective sometimes is really what it takes, right?
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, Fede, this has been a great conversation. I want to take a break. And then when we come back, let's talk about how someone can evaluate sort of whether that new job or that new path is really the right one for them.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to check out the show notes at thecareerq.com, where you can also subscribe to the podcast and sign up for our newsletter.
Welcome back. We are talking with Fede today all about career transitions and how to know when you are ready for a change. So Fede, before the break, we had been talking about, people figuring out what their values are and, following that passion. I think the phrase you would use was start with your passion. So how does somebody evaluate really whether this new path or this new career that's sort of right in front of them is going to be the right one for them?
Well, they won't know until they start. I think that's one thing. So, and you don't necessarily need to start the new career and, quitting the previous job and start another one. There are little tests that can be done, little trials, if possible. You want to open a restaurant, if that's the new career changes, before you go and buy a restaurant and trying to open a new one, maybe you could take a Saturday off and go and work in a restaurant and see how it feels. So I think it's very important, especially when we're talking about drastic changes, to do those sort of trials and see how it feels. And if we get enough of good vibe, then take the risk.
Mm-hmm.
I think taking the risk, it is my advice. As I said, always make sure there is that little safety net behind. Don't take the risk blindly. But once you're sure that somehow you have that worst case scenario covered, then just take the risk and see where it goes. And in regards to that, there is something that I remember from, it's been many, many years, but it always stays with me. And one of the, for my former HR director once told me there are 3 types of personality when it comes to career and, career development and all of that. So the first type is the planner, is the one that knows where they are going to be in 5 years' time and in 10 years' time, and they have those goals and they plan for it and they know what are the steps in the middle, how and when they're going to get there, and they just make that beautiful, wonderful project plan. And usually they go about that and achieve whatever the milestones they have set out for themselves. And that's the type 1. And then there is the second type, which is more of an opportunistic type. And usually those type of people, they do not make long-term plan, but they are very good at capturing what are the opportunities around and reacting very well to their environment and realizing, this is interesting, and jumping onto those opportunities. So although they don't have a previously planned path, they usually also are going through their career very successfully. And they are more attuned, if you want, to capture those potentials that are outside. And they don't limit themselves to one tunnel, if you want, or one channel. And then there is the third type, which is more of a passive personality, where they wait and see and they look around and they need to be sure that they are usually the one that do not like to take big risks. And so they wait and see and they grab what is offered to them. And they can also be very successful in their life. However, usually the success is slower to come because it takes longer to go throughout this progression.
Right.
And in a way, it's important for each of us to understand what is our personality type. Because if we know what we are and we know what are the benefits of being that way and the negative side of it, we know how to plan and how to think better about our career. And also, I think when you start to really understand what it is that you are, who it is that you are and how you react to things, you can intentionally change that if it doesn't suit where you want to go. And so, in many cases, that type 3, that is more the passive one, by knowing that this is their natural tendency, they can start to define, I know that eventually I want to be specializing in that area. So let's really be more attuned to those vibes and grab those possibilities, because I know that I need to take more risks that I would naturally do. I know that I need to jump longer and higher, because I know that otherwise I would sit down and wait.
That's so interesting to think about, that sort of level of career planner or level of risk taker, and sort of how that actually does apply to your career path, right? As you mentioned, there's those planners who have these plan, for lack of a better word, but they plot along and they know, and they're very organized, and hey, I think I need these 3 experiences to get me to this next thing that I want to get to in 5 years or whatever, and they can follow their path. And then they're, as you mentioned, those opportunistics, like, hey, I'm open, right? That feels like that one, somebody that's just sort of open to, they're planful, they're going to be successful, but they're just open. And then there's those, the passive, sort of the wait and see, that feels less risk tolerant. So, they need to maybe put themselves out there a bit more, right? Just to know when it's available. So kind of given all of that, how, from a career transition perspective, like, how big of a change have you seen people be successful at, right? Like, are people making sort of like, oh, I'm a project manager now in finance, let me go be a project manager in IT, and that's a great change? Or is it, I'm a project manager in finance, or I'm an accountant and I do want to go open a restaurant? Like, what's the level of sort of success you see with these career changes, and like, where is there varying levels you'd recommend to people?
Well, there's success in all of them, really, and as much as it cannot be that successful, it really depends. But I think the biggest variable, and the one that really counts in many of those things, the assumption, let's assume that, all those changes on the various degree, from the one that goes from being a project manager in finance, and then it goes in does project management into another area, to the other extreme, the one that is, was a banker and decided to open a restaurant. The assumption is they have all gone through this process of really understanding themselves, knowing what they like. They created the safety net, they took their risk, and so they've done all their homeworks very well. I think what it really makes the difference between success and not success is the attitude. It's the perspective that they take when they jump into it first, and then the perspective that they continue to have throughout the journey. And it's, if you go and it seems very simple, too simple, but I believe in that. If you go and you're positive about it, eventually it does go positive. And yes, it might require a lot of changes around, and I'm saying, you go with a new perspective, and you might need to change that perspective a few times. But if ultimately is all around being positive and really going with leading ourselves with those passions that we have, and following what we believe is our mission in life, and we keep true to what we believe it is our true self and our true driver, then usually that is success, and it becomes success.
I like that, right? Just following your values or following your passion can be your success, right? Like knowing that you are doing something that you want to do can be your marker of success versus some sort of.
I love how you recap all my talking, and in 2 lines you say, yes, that's exactly what I said. Well done. You said it very well.
Maybe that's what I'm good at. That'll be my calling. Fede, one of the things I'm thinking about here is if somebody is sitting there, thinking about a career transition, is this something, can people do this on their own? Can they get to finding their passions and their values on their own? Or I know you're a career coach, so is that a recommended path to go with, you think? How do you feel about that? Yes,
well, I think that there are clearly two different type of people. There is the extroverted and the introverted. I am an extroverted, so of course I say, yes, go and talk to somebody is always the best way. Introverted people might find that more difficult to go and find and speak to somebody. However, what I truly recommend is talking about something and having somebody on the other side, almost, exactly what you were saying, what you were doing, Dana, 2 seconds ago, saying what I said, but with different words. And me going and say, yeah, that's what I want. That makes it more real. Mm-hmm. That makes it a lot more defined. That makes me look and say, yeah, actually, yeah, there is that other element that I didn't look at. Mm-hmm. Or yes, actually, that word really sounds very important. There is something behind that word. There is something bigger. And that is what, as coaches, we do. That is part of our process. But it doesn't necessarily need to be a coach, but it needs to be somebody on the other side that it doesn't, that it's not invested so much emotionally. So there isn't that what is important is almost to have in front a mirror that just gives back whatever we think at them and sort of keeps us straight. So, whether it is a coach or whether it is a friend or a coworker or whatever, I do believe that externalizing whatever is inside us, it makes it stronger, more real, more, bigger than it is, because we can look at it 360.
Right. I love that you started out with there are two types, the introvert and the extrovert, and maybe those introverts, maybe they write it down or they spend a little more time internally first. But what I hear you saying is, yeah, you even still need to get out there and, talk about it, even if it's not to a large crowd that maybe the extrovert's willing to do, right? But, some, one or two people just to get it, externalize it out there is helpful.
And it's all about perspective. Mm-hmm. So, it's just somebody else saying the same thing, but with different words. It might help to look at it from different angles.
Yeah, I love that. I can see the importance in that. And you call that a mirror, right? So they can sort of reflect that back to you and you can say, oh, that's not exactly what I was thinking, or, oh, that is, right? That's exactly where I wanted to go. I like that.
And sometimes say, hey, and you added that. I haven't thought about it, but wow, it is important. Let's look at it.
Mm-hmm. Well, career change or job change, I think, can be especially challenging for mid-career professionals, sort of who've invested a lot of time in their current career, and then maybe they've got all of these extra pieces to it. So, what advice do you have for those people? I know you mentioned sort of the be sure you've got that safety net kind of thing, but are there other pieces you think for sort of mid-career professionals you'd recommend if they're considering a career change?
Well, it all, what are their priorities? And in other, you can call it priorities or values. But what it is important? Why are they change? Why do they want to change? I think the most important question is starting with the why, and digging deeper from that. Why? I want more excitement. Okay, what excitement means for you, and digging deeper in that. Or I want more money. Okay, how much more? Let's be specific. And then going from there, I think, it's really evaluating those whys and creating priorities out of that. And then making sure that those priorities are reflected into either whatever they choose. And they think, I want a career change because I want to open the restaurant. Well, does opening a restaurant fit, and is it aligned with those priorities that hopefully have been spelled out? Or if those are your priorities, what type of job, what type of roles, or what type of elements does a job need to have? And sometimes, the majority of the clients that I have and that are looking for a major change, they do not know what they want. Mm-hmm. They're not coming and say, I want to open the restaurant. They don't, if they knew, they wouldn't come to me normally.
Right.
They don't know. And so it's really working through those whys and expanding them and priorities and values and all of that. And then it doesn't necessarily come out with, okay, this is the role for you. I found it. This is the job description. It's really going through elements of it, micro categories. And then the truth is, I do not think there is one job that is going to be the fulfilling job for each one of us. I believe many jobs and many roles can be fulfilling accordingly to whatever the criteria are for the individual. And so really just go and pick one that looks close enough. Because if you wait too long to find, oh no, but this job is not quite perfect, then you get stuck and you never move because you're waiting for the one that really reflects 100% what are your priorities and not your criteria. And there is never going to be the one that fits them 100%. So, go with the 80% rule. Does it fit it 80%? Well, okay, good enough. Let's go and try it.
Right. And see if that really sparks you, right? And you might find that other 20% somewhere in there that you didn't initially know was there.
Yeah. And as I was saying before, never jump completely into that, test it, test items.
I like that. I keep coming back to that thinking of the testing or, how you can sort of try it out, find those ways to try out a new change. It's an interesting perspective to have, I think. Well, Fede, this has been so great. Thank you. I would love to just sort of jump into some of the questions that we ask sort of all of our guests. And I love the answers to these questions. So Fede, what was your first job?
Right. So my real first job, I was doing babysitting. And if you ask me what I learned from it, let that baby cry during the night. But seriously, the first job I was this marketing assistant for this company that was making, it's 3M. So 3M does a lot of stuff, Post-it notes and more. I was doing the traffic signs. And I remember, I was just out of university, my first job and everything. And I was very conscious of hierarchy. And, this is my job description and I stay within the limit of my job description. I don't want to step on other people's toes and all of that. And then at some point, one of my colleagues came to me and say, this is your role and those are your thing. You need to be more assertive or you will never go around. That's what you're supposed to do and go and cross those limits and push them a little bit more because otherwise nobody's going to push them for you. You need to push them. You need to be assertive. You need to step a little bit, not too much. You need to step a little bit on other people's toes. And that advice, I took it and it stayed with me. It is still with me. It's been one of the most important advices I received.
Right. Just pushing just enough, right? Knowing what to push on, to push yourself so you can learn and grow. Nice.
Yeah, don't be afraid. Again, take risks.
So, Fede, what have you read or listened to lately that you would recommend to others?
Well, I mentioned it before. I live in Doha in Qatar, and here there are no public transports. So I drive a lot. And I listen to many, many podcasts, including, of course, this one, which I love. But there is another one that I really like and I recommend. It's called Startup. And it started with this guy. It's an American guy who was working as a producer for, I don't know what big company, broadcaster in the US, and decided he wanted to set up his own podcasting company. And so from the moment he started, major career change, he started to record himself and he made a podcast out of all the process. And so, the podcast starts with him discussing it with his wife, do you think? And then it starts to create a business plan. How do you create a business plan? How do you fail at creating business plan and the mistakes? Then finding investors and how do you pitch? The pitch part was great. Go and pitch to investor. Mm-hmm. It shows us all the failure and then how it went successful. And so there is this whole process on how to set up a company and how this company is set up. It starts to grow. It grows exponentially, and the problem and the challenges and the opportunities. And it's all recorded, and it's all very real and emotional. And I found it amazing. I definitely recommend it, especially for the people that want to be entrepreneurial in some ways. I think it's fantastic.
That's incredible. I have to look that one up. And it's called Startup. Is that right?
Yes.
Awesome.
Startup by Gimlet Media.
All right. I'm going to look that one up for sure. So, Fede, what would your 90-year-old self say to you today?
Well, she would say, well done. You had a lot of fun. Well done. I'm proud of you.
I love that. Well done. And I love the piece about having fun, right? So that's an important aspect of life, yes, for sure.
Yes. And she will arrive a little bit, broken and can't really work too well, but with that smile that you think, she's got something on me.
I love that. She's like, okay, you've done well. I'm not full. I'm not, I'm a little bit worn out, and that's the good way to be, huh?
Yeah. Yes. And we had lots of fun. And I started recently something that I love. So just before 2016, I never set intention for the year. I don't like it because I never respect them. But just before 2016, I decided that I realized that in my life, I didn't have enough fun. And so I talked to my husband and I said, you know what? This coming year, let's have fun. Let's make it our mission. Let's be very intentional to have fun. And we did it. And it was a great year. We had a lot of fun. And so, now it's 2017, and just before the year, I say, okay, so I think I want to add something to the fun. Let's have more adventure. Let's live adventurously this year. And so we set again this intention. It is not just a personal one. It's something that I share with the family. And I love that aspect. It's really something that is for our lives. And I think, when I'm 90, I will look back and I think, well done. Had fun, you had adventures and whatever more. And it's fantastic.
I love that. I love that sort of as a family, you have set this intention or this goal. So it's not a list of, resolutions to keep or to break, right? But it really is then, something that you all can go, yep, have fun. Okay. So then you bump all of your ideas against that, right? And is that going to be fun or something else?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I love that.
Shall we do this holiday? It's a lot of money. Who cares? It's going to be fun. Let's do it.
I love that. It's that first question to ask. Fantastic. Exactly. Well, Fede, this has been so great. And I loved talking to you about career transitions. I mean, I think you're a great model for just yourself, the career transitions you've been through, and then with your coaching and, you helping your clients through these career transitions and thinking about them. So if our listeners want to get sort of more information about you, how would they go about doing that?
Well, they can look me up on LinkedIn, Federica Ambrogi, and also they can write to my email. It's fambrogi, or one word, Ambrogi, at nextleap-coaching.com.
Wonderful. Well, I'll look forward to all of our listeners reaching out to you. And thank you so much for the conversation today, Fede.
Oh, it's been such a fun. I'm really an honor to be here. Thank you so much, Dana.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Be sure to head on over to thecareerq.com where you can get more information, show notes, and related articles to today's topic. Also, if you like what you're hearing, head on over to iTunes, subscribe to the podcast, and make sure you leave us a rating and review. We'd love to hear your feedback. Thanks again.